Okay, here we go. The next Tzurba Rabbanan shiur, the second shiur that is in Tzurba Rabbanan, the 17th volume, volume 17, the Lax family edition of the whole set of Tzurba Rabbanan. This is the Parrots family volume, and this is the third shiur about Kiddush, the second one in this volume. And we will continue the laws, the halachas of Kiddush. Today's shiur will be about the Issur of eating before Kiddush, sitting and standing for Kiddush. A very important halacha. Covering the Challahs when we make Kiddush, drinking from the Kiddush cup, and Kiddush b'makom seuda. Those will be the major topics that come up all the time. We spend a lot of time learning Hilchos Shofar and Hilchos Pesach and many other halachas, but one needs to spend time doing Hilchos Shabbos, and these are halachas that come up all the time every week, and therefore it is incumbent upon us, and it's a privilege for us to do all of these halachas. So we start off with the Issur of eating before Kiddush. So the Gemara tells us in Psachim, I'm on page 63 in the Tzurba Rabbanan Sefer, and we are source number 1. The Gemara in Psachim Daf Kufav tells us, Amar Rafuna Marav Tam Eina Makadish. If somebody eats before Kiddush, so then they don't make Kiddush. They don't make Kiddush. What does that mean? They don't make Kiddush. We'll see. For Rabba Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel Tal Mekadesh. We don't paskin that way anyway. Shmuel says that if one ate something tasted even before Kiddush, they still make Kiddush. And Amar of Hilchot Tal Mekadesh. Why would you say not? So if it's not in front of you, but if you look in the Maram Chalava, one of the Rishonim on that Gemara, the Maram Chalava wonders. He quotes from the Ravid, Hiksha Ravid v'chi mishum ta'avar v'tam lo yikadesh, because he did something wrong that he doesn't make Kiddush, and he quotes the Gemara in Brachas, Mishachal shum v'recho nodef, yochal shum acher v'yerecho nodef. If you ate garlic and your breath stinks, you should eat more garlic, your breath should stink more. That's the phrase the Gemara uses when if you do one thing wrong, you shouldn't do another thing wrong. And therefore, what's going on here? What's the svara? Upirish Huzal, and the Ravid explains this. Lo yikadeshu, he can't make Kiddush after he already ate because nira kimevaze es ha-mitzvah. It's ki'ilu he's not running to do the mitzvah. I'll do other things. I'll eat before I do the mitzvah. It's like a bizoyan to the mitzvah. Other people have to. He still has to hear Kiddush. He shouldn't make Kiddush. Someone else should make it for him. Either way, the Maram Chalava ends off. We don't pass in that way anyway. But that is, you see from here, at least l'chadchila, one is not supposed to eat before Kiddush. The Rambam has this in Hilchos Perach Tes as maybe only wine. Issur la'adam lechol o lishtos yayin misha kiddush hayom kadesh. Even though the language of the Gemara is ta'am, which usually means anything, even water, and that's what we're makpid for, even water, the Rambam's lashon is wine. But if you look in the Shulchan Aruch changes that lashon. The Shulchan Aruch says in Reish Ayin Aleph, in source number 3, Issur litom klum kodem sheyikadesh afilu mayim. It's Issur to taste anything, even water, right against that Rambam that might be limited to wine, but that is the Shita. The Magen Avraham says that rinsing your mouth out would be okay, because that's not called eating, that's not called swallowing. The Magen Avraham says Issur litom, nirali, if somebody has a bad taste in their mouth, they want to take mouthwash, so then that's not swallowing. That's not even food. But nearly destroy lerchot's piv, the kiva dena machavin lanos teima, since there's no kavana for the hana of tasting. V'chein masha b'tshuvas hadeshen umisha chashecha afilo kibel Shabbos. When does this Issur teima start at night? When Shabbos starts. Shabbos morning, we spoke about in previous shiurim, then the Chiyuv of Kiddush only starts after Shachris, and that's when the Issur of Te'ima starts. But when Shabbos, a Friday night, is when Shabbos starts. When you're Makabel Shabbos, Vim Kibo Olav Shabbos, either at night when it gets dark, or if there was an earlier Kabbalah Shabbos, if you were Makabel, as we discussed in past shiurim of Tosefas, Afil Mi Bod Yom, Issur Lito. If somebody has to take medicine, what if somebody has to take medicine before they eat? So then you can. The Shmir Shabbos says, Umisha Lafi Pekudas Rofe, Tzarech Lakachas Trufos Man Malafnei Arucha. So if somebody has to take medicine before they partake of the meal, so mutal olavola, and he can swallow it, and even a little water, because that's also not called drinking. That's why you don't make a bracha on that if you're just taking a drop of water in order to swallow the pills. This is an Issur before. What if you have no food? If you have no food, you have no challah, you have no wine, you have nothing to make Kiddush on. So the Halachot doesn't say you should starve. The Magen Avraham says, so then you can eat. Then you can eat without making Kiddush. But ein breira, right? That's what the Magen Avraham says in Reish Peites, that if you don't have anything, so then it's fine. But if you know you're going to get a little bit later in the evening, so then you should wait. should wait, even if it's a couple of hours. The Magen Avraham says, Mikol Makom, on the top of page 65, Nirali di mitzape sheyavi'ulo, if you know that people are going to bring you at a certain point later, Yamten al kapanim at chatzos laila. Because Kiddush is Kiddush. Kiddush is Kiddush. Aval, but Kiddush hayom ain't sarach. Daytime Kiddush, you don't have to wait that long. Daha yesh omrim, we said earlier, remember the sheet of the Ravid? There's no Issur of eating before Kiddush on Shabbos day, only Friday night. So we're going to see that comes up numerous times, but that comes up here. It says the Magen Avraham quotes it in a Shas Adchak, that you don't have food and it's not going to come for a couple of hours, so then one can eat beforehand. So that's in terms of eating before Kiddush. So when we get home Friday night, we can't eat anything, can't drink anything, and we should go straight to Kiddush, as we said. So we come to Kiddush, standing or sitting. So what's amazing is that it's not mafurish in the Gemara anywhere. Something that we do all the time. The Gemara probably assumes that, we know what to do. We know what to do. Why does the Gemara tell us what to do? Sitting, standing, unclear. So as background, halachically, what would be more appropriate? So we know, in order to be Motzei someone in other brachos, the Gemara in the Mishnah in brachos discusses that we have to have a kvius. You have to have a connection to all the people that you're being Motzei. So that usually in the days of old meant that everybody has to do heseba, reclining. So that's the Mishnah in brachos in the 6th parak. We don't really do that nowadays. Our sitting is like reclining, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch summarizes the Gemara and the Mishnah. The Shulchan Aruch in Reish Yud Gimel in source number 7. Uladidan have a yeshiva kamo heseba l'ditu. Our sitting is like their reclining. And therefore, ulafize l'didan de leslan heseba ein chilik bein pas v'yayin l'shar dvarim. We don't have a difference between bread or wine or other things. Sitting is koveya and connects us to be a unit, a group. To be yeshiva, filu pas v'yayin, echad mavarach l'kulam. If you're sitting down, one person. When we make hamotzi, the balabais makes hamotzi for everyone else. That's a kvius, and one is yotze from others. V'shalo b'yeshiva. If you're not sitting down, then how can one be motzi someone else? B'shar dvarim nami kol echad mavarach l'asma. Everybody should make their own bracha. So what about today? Based on this, maybe l'chara sounds like if one person is making kiddush for all, or havdalah, we'll talk about havdalah b'Hashem in a future shiur, then l'chara one should sit down. One should sit down. Unless you say, and this is what Tosfos says in Brachas Daf Mem Gimel, if somebody is doing a mitzvah and they're koveya themselves and they're concentrating, so then maybe it's different. Maybe that's good enough. I'm not just in the shuk, walking around and making a bracha for others. No, but I'm concentrating on the mitzvah. Says Tosfos, Tzarachin, he asks about Havdalah, but he says, B'Shema Yesh Lomar, Mitosha Kovin Atzman, Kedei Latzeis Yidei Havdalah, Kaboy Nam Yakula Milsa. Since you're koveya yourself to do the mitzvah of Havdalah, so too it works for all. Lakach Noeh V'Tov L'Mavdil V'Gam L'Shomim Sheyeshvu. So Tosfos says to sit, but we'll have to get back to that. But based on all of this, for Kiddush, says the Kolbo, one of the Rishonim, that you should sit for Kiddush if you're being Motzei others, which often happens on Friday night. Says the Kolbo in source number 9, Nachon lahavdil, Havdalah is me'umad, because there's another reason Havdalah should be standing, and that is milave the melech, milave malka. Shanu milave noso v'derech levaya me'umad, v'kiddush nami shehu kemosh ana yotzin l'gras hamelech, hayelo la'omra me'umad. Lefishen kiddush al makam suda, but kiddush is connected to the suda, that's it. The Kolbo says, even if you want to stand by Havdalah, you should sit by Kiddush. So that's the sheet of the Kolbo. So we have one sheet of the Rishonim. Again, the Gemara says nothing. The Gemara says nothing about sitting or standing for Kiddush. So the Kolbo, sitting. Says the Beis Yosef, Veli nire, after quoting the Kolbo, to Mekadish Me'uman, I think he should stand. Me'umid, Nami, it also works. Kivan de Samoch l'Shulchan, since they're all standing around the table, Shamper Mikri b'Makam Suda. So that's enough. It's enough to be called Makam Suda. Shaharela das Rambam b'Chag HaSukkah sorach l'kadosh be'ubar. Because after all, you look in the Rambam in Hilchos Sukkah. The Rambam says there you should make Kiddush standing. It's interesting. The Beis Yosef says you should make Kiddush standing, since the Rambam says in Hilchos Sukkah you should make Kiddush standing. Look closely at that Rambam. The Rambam doesn't say a word. Another interesting fact. The Rambam doesn't say anything about Kiddush sitting or standing in Hilchos Shabbos. It's a diuk from Hilchos Sukkah. But maybe it's different than the diuk that the Beis Yosef just made. The Beis Yosef says you should make Kiddush standing because everybody's next to the table, it's Kili, you're sitting, and the Rambam says on Sukkot you should make Kiddush standing. But if you look in the Rambam is clearly saying that only on Sukkot you make Kiddush standing. Mashma that the rest of the time you make Kiddush sitting. The Rambam said you make Kiddush standing because the Rambam Shita is Leishe Basukah means to sit in the sukkah. And therefore you have to make the bracha before you sit down. And that's what the Rambam says in Hilchot Sukkah, Perak Vav Halacha Yud Beis. It's Yud Beis, not Beis. Yud Beis. Kol zman she'ikanes Leishe Basukah, whenever you go into the sukkah, Mevarech Kodem Sheyeshev. You make the bracha before you sit down. Before you sit down, you make the bracha. And then the Rambam mentions the other brachas. Nimsa, Mekadish Me'umad, Umavarach Leishe Basukah, V'yoshev. You make the bracha of Kiddush, Leishe Basukah, and then you sit down. Ukazeh hayaminag rabosai v'rabbanei svarad l'kadesh me'umad b'leil rishon shel chag HaSukkos. And this was the minhag of my rabbeim to make Kiddush in Sukkos standing. Mashma clearly from the Rambam that normally you made Kiddush sitting. But so that is, you have the kolbo that says you make Kiddush sitting. The Rambam sounds that way. The Beis Yosef says, no, I think you can say it's standing, because if you're around the table, just like the reclining transferred to sitting, so standing around the table is also okay. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch quotes, well, the first half of Kiddush is Vayachulu, as we've said. It's not really Kiddush, it's Eidus, as we discussed in previous shiurim. So Eidus is always at standing. So it's a little tricky here. You have Vayachulu, which is Eidus. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes, Omer Vayachulu Me'umad, V'yachar kach Omer B'rei Piragafen V'yachar Kiddush. So the Shulchan Aruch sounds like you say Vayachulu standing, and then everything else sounds like everything else is sitting. So this sounds like that minhag, and we know there are three minhagim. Some people sit for the whole Kiddush, stand for the whole Kiddush, or stand and sit. So this Shulchan Aruch sounds like stand and then sit. But then the Ramah adds the other two minhagim. All three minhagim are quoted in Shulchan Aruch. The Yachol Lamod B'Shas Kiddush. You could stand for Kiddush. And that's the minhag of the Arizal, that's the minhag of Hasidim, that because you're going to stand for the first half of Kiddush, because of Vayachulu, because it's Eidus, so you stand for the second half of Kiddush. This at least is Friday night. Shabbos day, it seems like most poskim say one should sit for Kiddush. But the Shulchan, the Ramah here quotes, you can stand for the whole thing. V'yosher tov leishev. But it's better to sit for the whole thing, says the Ramah. Except for v'nogan leishev abishashom vayachulu. The minhag is to sit even for vayachulu. Rak kishamaschilin. When you start off Yom HaShishi, omdim l'ksas l'kavod hayom. You stand a little bit. You give a little bit of a pick your body up from the chair, because Yom HaShishi spells out Shem Hashem. Yom HaShishi vayachulu Shemayim. So therefore, you lift it up. So again, each of the minhagim are found in the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. So again, why would sitting be better? Because it's kfiyus and you're being Motzei others. Why standing? Because that's eidus, and you might have stand for the first half and sit for the second half to get both, or stand for the whole thing so that you do one consistent act. The Mishnah Berurah explains that the B'kai Gavna, it's better to sit. Kivan sheyoshi makam sudasa v'chein hiskin bir hagra umitamacher to be poter. So different days, and whatever one does, it is good. The Birkei Yosef is the one that quotes the Arizal and the Rav Chaim Vital that one stands. So whatever one does, one should follow their family custom. Interesting. It's not in your booklet, but where to start from by Kiddush? Where do you start from? So Yom HaShishi, most people start. But it's already pointed out that Yom HaShishi has two problems. Number one, it's only part of a pasuk. I think we discussed this in previous shiurim. The Gemara says, called Psuke de lo paske Moshe anan lo paskinan. You can't say a half a pasuk. So how could you say Yom HaShishi? Number two, it doesn't really make sense. Like Yom HaShishi is the end of a previous day 6. Vayichulu Hashemayim. Vayichulu is the next part of the pasuk. Next pasuk talking about Shabbos. So there are those that say the whole phrase. Vayer vayivoker Yom HaShishi. Vayichulu Hashemayim v'aretz chol tzva'am. So some say that, but that solves the problem that you have a phrase that makes sense, but it's still half a pasuk. The pasuk starts off with Vayar Elokim es kol asher asav v'hinei tov ma'od Vayar v'yivoker. So what do you do? So different hagim. So the Ramah, if you look back at the Ramah that we just read, the Ramah doesn't seem to have a problem with a half a pasuk. Maybe it's relying on the Shitahs that we mentioned in the last year or 2 shiurim ago, that if you're saying a pasuk as a tefillah, as a bakasha, not as a pasuk, then you can say half a pasuk. And we do it often. Al pi Hashem b'yad Moshe at the end of Hagbah, that's half a pasuk. So let's say psukim as tefillah, that's okay. And what about not making any sense? Just says Yom HaShishi. So that's what the Ramah says. I guess you want to get Yud Kei Vav Kei at the beginning of Shabbos. That's what you say. The Aruch HaShulchan suggests that maybe you should start at the beginning of the pasuk. The Chassam Sofer, interestingly, you don't have it in front of you, but the Chassam Sofer and Aruch Chaim and Siman Yud, he has 3 steps. He says, really, he quotes this problem. Yesh mefach bekim amashen ogim laskol kiddush bilal Shabbos kodesh v'yer v'yivoker. Some say v'yer v'yivoker is a problem to start because it's the Emsa pasuk. So he says, v'omarti liyashiv eminag. I said to be miyashiv. Ki birtzonam lahaskol yom hashishi mipnei tzir shem havaya. We want to start with Yud Kei Vav Kei because it's Shem Hashem. But starting with Yom HaShishi doesn't mean anything. Yom HaShish ve'chul HaShemayim. Okay, and that's why we added on Vayer V'Yivoker. Umat Tomar, what? You want to say the whole pasuk? Ve'alakim is kol asher asav v'nei tomod, says the Chassam Sofer. There's a negative medrash on that part of the pasuk, so we don't want to say it. It's unbelievable that he explains it that way. Ve'alakim is kol asher asav v'nei tov ma'od. The medrash says tov ma'od zehamaves. Whatever that means, we're not getting into that right now, but the Chassam Sofer says, because of that, that's why, well, you can't say that part of the pasuk, so you just start with Vayer V'Yivoker. Unbelievable. In the footnotes here of the Chassam Sofer, he quotes different nihugim, different records of what the Chassam Sofer did. Some say he said Vayer Elokim es kol asher asa quietly, some say he didn't, he just started with Vayer V'Yivoker. Different reports of what the Chassam Sofer did. Okay, either way, this is Kiddush, standing, sitting. The Mishnah Berurah also quotes a minhag of looking at the candles right before Kiddush, but this is all that topic. So we continue. Says the, looking on the next page 70 now. Next topic, covering the Challahs. Covering the Challahs for Kiddush. So the Gemara Pesachim describes that in the days of old, they used to have small tables, and those tables often were not brought out until after Kiddush. If they were brought out, Tosfos says in source number 17, our tables are big, so they have to be brought out. They're always there before, so we just cover whatever is on the table, and that's what the Gemara, the Rashbam says also, and the Tosfos. If it was not there, fine, but if it's there, what's called pores mapa umakadesh, spread out a cover and be makadesh on wine. Question is why? Why do we cover the challah? Three reasons in the Rishonim. Says the Rashbam in the name of the She'iltos. And Tosfos quotes the She'iltos, the Rashbam in the name of She'iltos, source number 16. Here we are. Says who is the She'iltos? Rav Achoy Gaon. One of the Gaonim. The Gaonim lived between the Gemara and the Rishonim. We don't have so much of their writings, between the year 500 and 1000. Anybody who has a last name Gaon, he was the Rosh Yeshiva. Rav Achoy Gaon, Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Nisim Gaon, Rav Sadia Gaon. Right, so all the Gaonim. So the She'iltos, the Rav Achoy Gaon, the She'iltos, we learn Shitahs that are quoted by the other Rishonim. Shitahs is not such a popular sefer. It wasn't such a popular sefer to learn until the Netziv wrote an amazing commentary on it. Once the Netziv wrote the Hemek She'ela on the Shitahs, and now people learn the Shitahs because of the commentary. But the Rashbam quotes the Shitahs and says, here, why do we cover the challah? Because everything should be brought to in front of us l'kavet Shabbos. So right after we make Kiddush, in the days when they didn't bring the table at all, so you'd make Kiddush, Mekadesh HaShabbos, so now everything that comes is l'kavet Shabbos. So now, even though we have the table in front of us, you should still cover so that only after you declare this meal as special for Shabbos, then you bring the food. Right? Special for you. That's what the Rashbam says. Deliktish l'kiddusha the Shabbos l'makrin ma'itame ki hechi de tesi l'suda l'yakar the Shabbos. L'kavet Shabbos. Reason number one. Reason number two. Tosfos mentions towards the end zecher laman. V'yesh b'faris zecher laman shlo haya yored b'shabbosos v'yamim tovim. It did not fall. The man didn't fall on Shabbos and Yantif. V'haya tal milamalo melamata. And the tal was in a beautiful package. Right. It had a cover on top, cover below. I like to say that was the earliest sources of Ziploc bags. Imagine if you drop something in the sand. You pick it up, you wipe it off, there's always going to be a little crunchy sand still left. And millions of packages of sandwiches fell every day, and all of them were in perfect, they didn't get dirty, they didn't get sandy. And they had a cover below and the cover on top. That's the zah. So too we have covered the archala as a zecher to the man. The Rosh quotes the third reason, probably the most famous reason. The Rosh quotes in Arvi Pesachim there, Boshes Hapas. Because the bread is embarrassed. Why? Because if you in Hilchas Brachas, the bread or even Mizonos should come first before Yayin in Hilchas Brachas, and here we're going to make a Bar Paragafen before we make our Motzei. That's inappropriate. So that's why the Challah, so to speak, would be embarrassed. So that's why we cover the Challahs. There's a story that's told, you fill in the Gadol. I heard it in the name of the Chavetz Chaim. Later on, at the end of the shiur, it's quoted in the name of Yisrael Salanter, all different Rabbanim, but always the same. We got the same message of the story. There was a Rav that came home, and he went home with the Balabas, and he was having the Gadol Adar, and he was so excited, and he walks into the house, and on a Friday night, and the table is set, and the candles are lit, and everything is beautiful and gorgeous, and he sees his wife is on the couch, exhausted. She was preparing all day for the Gadol Adar to come, and he sees, though, that the Challahs aren't covered. And he starts screaming at his wife. He's like, how could you embarrass me in front of the Gadol Adar? Everybody knows that you have to cover the Challahs. And she jumps up and she runs to cover the Challahs. And the Gadol Adar, the Chavetz Chaim, or Rabbi Salanter, you fill it in, says, Mister, do you know why you cover the Challah? He's like, yeah, so the Challah's not embarrassed. He said, you think you're worried more about your wife, the Challahs, than about your wife? We have to learn the messages. The Challah's not getting embarrassed. The Challah's not becoming red. But it's all about teaching us, many halachas that are there to teach us certain midos. Right? The Mizbeach doesn't have a ramp. Right? The ramp, the floor is going to be embarrassed seeing our nakedness. So it's there to teach us something. But either way, this is the third reason. So again, number one, Yakra de Shabsa, so everything comes l'kavet Shabbos. Number two, Zeichab to the Man. And number three, so the Challah's not embarrassed. There are many nafkamina, 5 or so or more nafkaminas lahalacha, depending on what the reason is, and we try to be machmer for all of them. Right? The Mishnah quotes from the Taz. What if you're making Kiddush on bread? We mentioned in earlier shiurim, sometimes you may have to make Kiddush on bread if it's chaviv or if somebody doesn't have wine. So if the reason is l'kavet Shabbos, so it should be covered until you say the words Mekadesh Shabbos. If you say Zecher to the Man, it probably should be covered too. But if you say so it's not embarrassed, there's no reason to cover. You're not making a ber pagafen, you're making a Motzei. So according to that reason of embarrassment, so then it wouldn't have to be covered. The Mishnah says in source 19, Makadesh alapazi, and Surah Lachazos alav. Mapa. But according to the other reasons, Zecher the Man, it would. Number 2, when can you uncover the Challahs? Some people, take off the cover right after they make Kiddush. Before they go wash, they take off the cover. So the poskim say maybe not. Maybe you should leave it on a little bit longer. Why? If the reason is so the Challah's not embarrassed, okay, you can take it off right away because the Ber Pagavan is over. But if it's Zecher to the Man, so maybe when we make Hamotzi, it should be covered. Right? Mashmal, Diltam Zecher Laman, says the Mishnah Berurah, Tovshi Mechuse ad Achar, Birchas Hamotzi. Even after Birchas Hamotzi, according to that reason. What about third nafkamina? And this is quoted by the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch on the next page 72. What about other foods, mizonos? Can you bring other things to the table? Before, after Hamotzi, and before? What else has to be covered? Let me take it back. What has to be covered? You have to cover the mizonos. You have to cover the pickles. You have to cover the coleslaw if it's already on the table. So again, if the reason is so it's not embarrassed, so anything that doesn't come before Beri Pragafen, you don't have to cover because there's no embarrassment there. But if it's Yakra de Shabsa, you want to declare this as a Shabbos meal and then bring everything, maybe everything. They quote from Rav Salvation, he used to cover everything. He used to come to a hotel sometimes and cover everything, the pickles and the coleslaw, everything was covered because of Yakra de Shabsa. You want, as if nothing's there until you declare this as a Shabbos meal and then one uncovers it. Maybe at least mizonos would, to the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch discusses for the embarrassment reason, because mizonos also would go before Bari Piragafen. So at a Kiddush, let's say making Kiddush, maybe cover the cookies, even if you don't cover everything. But some others, the Tamei Magen says maybe you don't have to cover the cookies, only bread. Okay, there are other nafkaminas. What about Shitahs? Do you have to cover the Challahs by Shitahs? So again, we don't make Kiddush at Shitahs. We'll learn about that. The Mishnah Berurah quotes based on a Rambam, you should be Kovei Suda al Yayin, have wine during the meal, but we don't have Kiddush. So again, if the reason is so it's not embarrassed, there's no reason to cover because you're not making Beri Piragafen first. But if it's the other reasons, is man, maybe it should be covered. Or do you need a final? What about a cover underneath? We generally have challah boards, but is that needed? A separate cover underneath. So again, if it's zecher to the man, yes, the man was covered on top and on bottom. Because of the other reasons, maybe not. Okay, moving right along to the next topic: drinking from the kos shel bracha. Drinking from the kos shel bracha. So, how much does one have to drink? Right, by a kos shel bracha. So, Gemara Pesachim Daf Kuf Zayin. The Gemara tells us, Amar Rav Huna Marab, I'm on page 74 now. Rav Rav V'cheitani Rav Gidel Demin Narish Hamakadish V'Tom Malei Lugmav Yatza. To be Yotzei Kiddush, you have to drink Malei Lugmav, which we usually translate as a cheekful. V'Imlav Lo Yatza. If you didn't drink a cheekful, so then you were not Yotzei Kiddush. Not Yotzei Kiddush. Tosas points out it's not exactly a cheekful. It's a little, or it's not exactly a revius. It's a rove revius. That's what we assume. A rove revius is how much we have to drink in order to be Yotzei Kiddush. I have to make Kiddush on a revius of wine, but to drink rove revius of that. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Tzarech lishtos mikos shel Kiddush kimali lugmav. Dahainu kol sheyisalkenu l'tzad echad bepiv v'yira'eh mali lugmav. Rubo shel revius. Rubo shel revius. Why is that? So Tosfos assumes in Maseches Yuma Daf Pei that's what's Mesiv Daita. That's what gives a certain level of satisfaction. Yisuve Daita, that amount of wine, and therefore that's what was instituted. Again, this is all Durabanan. Midaraisa Kiddush Bidvarim. We said according to most Rishonim in the previous shiurim. Kiddush Bidvarim Midaraisa. Kiddush ala kos. According to one day is daraisa, but we assume it's durabanan. So for sure, drinking the wine is durabanan. How much do you have to drink? You have to drink a rove revius. What happens if I'm about to drink and so let's say I'm sitting down and one of my kids is very excited about Kiddush, so he reaches over and as I'm sitting down, he bangs into my hand and the whole Kiddush cup falls and all the wine is on the floor and all over the tablecloth. What's the halacha? So the Beis Yosef first says, Venirali, you have it there in source 26, the Beis Yosef and Reish Ayin Aleph. Reish Ayin Aleph are all the halachas of Kiddush. A lot of the details, not all. Kiddush Malkum Sud is the next siman after. Venirali, Shem Nishbach HaKos Kodem Sheyitom. Eino Tzorach Lachzor L'Kadesh. Says the Beis Yosef, if the wine spilled beforehand, you don't have to make Kiddush again. That which we said, if you didn't taste anything, you're not Yotzei. Hainu Lomar. It means you weren't Yotzei the mitzvah in a perfect way, but you were Yotzei the mitzvah. Right? This sounds like, if you remember the Ran in Psachim says, like Rabbi Gamliel, right? It's the Ran, I think, in Sukkah about the Mishnah in Psachim, right? The Mishnah in Psachim says, Kol Shelo Amar Rabbi Gamliel. If you didn't say these three things, so Yotzei Yechovaso. Not Yotzei, so the Ran says, it means you weren't Yotzei Karoi. You weren't Yosef Sibrit Mitzrayim in its perfect sense. So here too, that's what the Beis Yosef says. You weren't Yosef Kiddush perfectly, you didn't drink the wine. But it sounds like from there you were Yosef. You don't have to do anything else. It spilled out, you said Ber Pergafen, okay, it's a Bracha L'Vatala, but you were Yosef Kiddush. The Magen Avraham, though, thinks that the Beis Yosef is Soser himself. Because the Beis Yosef says that we just read, but then the Beis Yosef later on quotes the Archas Chaim, who says, and you have this in source 27, the Magen Avraham points this out, Di'ilo Tami Le'achrini, if nobody drank from the wine, which we'll talk about Be'ez Hashem soon, Tzorach L'Meder Kiddush, you have to make Kiddush again. Sounds like you have to. And if you spilled that, you aren't Yotzei. And the Rabbanan have the power, once they say you have to do the mitzvah in this way, then you have to drink it. L'chein Nirali, the Magen Avraham says, the Chazer Bo B'Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch was Chazer Bo. That you have to drink. V'kasav she'yaviu kos acher v'yito mimenu. If it's spilled out, you got to get another cup. The kivan shekidish al hayayin. V'to'am al bishol to'am, he also goes. Yatza. You have to drink some. Even if it's not from the same cup, you're still Yotzei, as long as you drink some wine. So the Magen Avraham assumes that the Beis Yosef was Soser, and he was Choser, and he says, you do have to. And the Mishnah Berurah also quotes this, but the Rabbi Tzionah B'Shol is not so convinced. He thinks that you have to reread the second part of the Beis Yosef, Machlokas HaPoskim, about that. L'chara, one should be machmer and should make sure to get some more wine if part of it spills out. Who has to drink the wine? Who has to drink the Mali Lugmav? So 3 Shitahs in the Rishonim. 3 Shitahs in the Rishonim, and as we'll see, they're all quoted in Shulchan Aruch. The Torah quotes a Machlokas Rishonim between, we'll see, the Gaonim and the Rush. V'imhayu, source 29, Reish Ayin Aleph. V'imhayu ha-mesubin shnayim o rabim. If there are many people sitting at the table, what if the Makadish didn't drink? Let's say this comes up sometimes. A family wants to be Mechabed, the grandfather, right? The Zaken with Kiddush, but he can't drink so much. So what happens? What do? You have to drink Mali Lugmav. He's not going to be able to drink Mali Lugmav. So you say, don't let him say Kiddush. You want him to say Kiddush. You want to give him that covet. So is there an option for someone else to drink Mali Lugmav? That's a Machlokas Rishonim. If somebody else drank Mali Lugmav, Kasva Gaonim Shelo Yatza. No good. The Gaonim are Machmir here. Sometimes the Gonim are machmir, sometimes they're mekel. Here they're machmir. Shalo Yatza elam kein toma makadesh. The makadesh has to be the one that drinks mole lugmav. V'kach kasav bahag. So to the bahag. Because of remember, a lot of these halachas of Kiddush are from the Gonim. Right? We just had Rav Achoy Gon in the Sheiltos, because if it's not in the Gemara, the Gonim were the next poskim that told us what to do. If somebody else drank and you didn't drink, bring more wine. The Gonim say the Makadesh has to be the one. So in the case of the grandfather, sorry, he can't make Kiddush. He can't make Kiddush because the Makadesh has to be the one to drink. But the Rosh, the Tur quotes his father, the Rosh, who says, no, I don't think so. Maybe the Tur saw this at his Shabbos table. Somebody else could do it. Somebody has to drink a mali lugmav, a rov revius. You can't combine everybody together. Because you need one person to get that shtia shel hana'ah, says the Rosh. Fine. So that is machlokas rishonim, whether the Makadesh has to be the one to drink a mali lugmav, or one person, even if it's not the Makadesh. Any other Shitahs? One more, the Ritva. The Ritva and Erevin. The Ritva and Erevin says b'diavad, or he says we say la halacha b'diavad, but the Ritva says that possibly if everybody there combines and together they drink mali lugmav, maybe that could also work. That's what the Ritva says in source number 30. Erevin ayin tes umari zal hayim mesupak im lo tam echad me'am mali lugmav shetamu ben kulam kishira hu im yatzu. Right, so the Rosh says no, one person. The Gonim say no, the Makadesh. The Ritva quotes this daya that as long as they're mitzaref together, that is good enough. The Shulchan Aruch quotes all of the three reasons, and he adds in one other point as well. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Reish Ayin Aleph Yud Dalet at the end of the Siman. If somebody else not in the Makadesh had Mali Lugmav, Yatza is Yotze. You can't combine two. That's the Shita of the Rosh. Umikol Makom. The Shulchan Aruch adds in though, and this was at the end of the Rosh also. Mitzvah Manamufchar Shita Mukulan. There's a mitzvah Manamufchar for everybody to get a little bit of wine. Not everybody has to drink a Mali Lugmav. But everybody has to get should get mitzvah and a mufchar. You're yotze kiddush without drinking anything. But the mitzvah and a mufchar, the Shulchan Aruch quotes to get a little bit of wine. But either way, that's opinion number one, like the Rosh. The yesh omrim de kivan shebein kulam ta'amo kamali lugmav yatsu. Some say if everyone combined to drink mali lugmav, that's also okay. The shtias kulam mitzdarefes l'kashir. Everybody together. It's a din in the coast, not a din in the gavra. The Rosh was saying, to a little lumdis, the Rosh was saying, it's a din in a gavra. They have to have a gavra that has a shtia shel hana. And this shita seems to be, the Ritva seems to be saying, no, it's a din of a kosher bracha. The kosher bracha needs to be drunk. A rov revius needs to be drunk, not he needs to drink it. And that's it. And then he quotes the Gaonim, Bagonim Sovrim, Shelo Tama Makadish Lo Yatza, Very Lachers Levrayim, L'chadchila, one should be choshish for the Gaonim. But again, if there's counter pressure, if there's kibud av, kibud saba, so then definitely one can rely on this. Another time where this might come up, we mentioned a couple of shiurim ago about you need a rov revius to drink, and that's why, let's say, making kiddush on schnapps in the morning is a big problem, right? Because you have less than a rov revius in the shot glass. So what do you do? So we mentioned there's a taz by bracha achrona, a couple of stadim. Really, it's a real b'diavad. One wants to have a shot of schnapps in the morning, be yotze kiddush with someone else, and then have it. But I remember sometimes it's happened in shuls that I've been in. There was no grape juice, there was no wine, there was only schnapps. So what do you do? You just make a little bit. No. So I made them take a whole cup of schnapps, a whole cup, make kiddush, and then rely on this day of the Shulchan Aruch and split it up amongst everyone. So at least you have the shiur, the shtia of the shiur, al yedei kulam, they're mitzdarif, like that Ritva that's quoted in Shulchan Aruch. But that's another case where this would come up. Again, l'chadchila, we should try to have the Makadesh, as the Shulchan Aruch quotes, Mishnah Berurah quotes, even kol mesubin or mitzdarif, if that's what you need. The Rav Ovadia, though, he thinks one person, like the rules of Shulchan Aruch. The first opinion of the Shulchan Aruch is often the one that's ma'akev. Rav Ovadia, Chazon Ovadia, v'nira she'ha'ikr b'das maran kesvara rishona. The Makadish or one of the Mesubin have to take it. Right? Fine. The Shmir Shabbos discusses if a person cannot do it, drink it. Again, mishtatef everyone, or even a katan. A katan, as long as he is higiyah lachinach, he says, because again, it's a din derabanan. So even a katan, if he drinks some other lugmav, that could be okay. But the evet, if one needs to, that's what the Shmir Shabbos says. That's what the Shmir Shabbos says. Good. A defective cup, page 79, next related topic. Pagum. What is pagum? By definition, pagum wine means tainted or stained wine. Pagum wine means wine that somebody drank from. That's pagum wine. Wine that somebody drank from. So l'chadchila, one is not supposed to use pagum wine for Kiddush. Ta'amo pagmo. That's the language of Chazal. If you taste it, so then you've been pogim it. Only if you taste it. If, let's say, I have a cup of wine and I pour some out and drink from the other cup, it's not pagum, the one that I didn't drink from. Pagum means drunk from wine. How do you unpagum wine? You always, whenever you mix wines, you always go by what's on top. Always go by what's on top. If I drank from my cup, and then I'm like, I don't want so much wine, I'll put it back in my bottle, and I drank from the wine in my cup, I pour it back in the bottle, I have now puggumed up the whole bottle. But what do? If I want to pour some back, I first pour from the bottle into my cup. That unpuggums my wine by whatever goes on top, and now I can pour it back in. But that's the concept of a pugum, and that's l'chadchila, we're not supposed to use it. That's what the Gemara says in Psachim, Daf Kuf Hey, Daf Kuf Vav, talking about when one has one kos of wine and you have at Shitahs. So you have Shitahs wine and Havdalah, so you don't want to drink it and then only a pugum for later. So in that context, the Gemara says, Shma mina ta'amo pugmo. Right? If somebody tastes it, that's pogim it. And the different Amorim say you could be pogim up a cup, chatzva pegima, even a kasa, even a whole chavis. Right? That's the halacha. That's the halacha. We paskin that, again, the Birchas Hamazon kos is not for now, but l'chadchila, one is not supposed to use pugum wine. So how does, we just mentioned from the Shulchan Aruch, so it's good to give everybody a little bit of the wine. Everybody should taste a little bit of the wine. Is there any way that they could not get pugum wine? So there is a machlokes. Maybe only the Makadish needs unpuggumed wine. So if the Makadish drinks from the cup and then gives out, it's okay. It's okay because the Makadish had. That's a machlokes between the Rosh and the Ra'ah. The Rosh says everybody should l'chadchila have, so then we have to come up with another solution, which we'll mention. Ein tzarach ha'mevarech lahatel mikosa l'kosa echad ve'echad. The Rosh says the Makadish doesn't have to pour into every cup. Obavachli yakosa shalom pegumim. Right, as long as everybody has their own cup of wine, so they can drink it. Right, once they get it. But aval m'hayi pegumin, if they're pagum tzarach lishpoch mikos shal bracha el toch kol kos v'kos. Right, if they each have pagum wine, you have to pour from the kos to unpagum the situation. The Ra'ah on the Rif, there in Brachas, says no, as long as the Makadesh has non-pagum wine, that is good enough. But l'chadchila, one should have unpagum wine. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Ein Sarech, source 38. Ein Sarech lishpoch mikosa mekadesh lekosas yayin shalavnei mesupin. You don't have to pour from the cup you make kiddush on if everybody has their own cup. Everybody often happens in a hotel or in a camp. Everybody's holding a little bit of wine. They're Yotze and they drink the wine. That's fine. That's non-pagum. Only the Makadish has to have the one with kos male. Elam kenoi pagumin. If they're pagum, then trying to make them pagum. So what do? So how do you? Let's say if the balabais is dishing out wine to everyone, so how do you give them unpagum wine? If he drinks from the kos and then pours into cups, so that's it's pagum up the wine. And if there are guests over, it's probably not so thrilled with the germs bisman hazeh. So what do? So there is a sharat tziyun. The sharat tziyun says if it's only your family, lo maisa. The sharat tziyun says if everybody drinks from the cup itself, that's not called pagum. So if I drink from my cup and then I give it to my wife and she drinks from the cup and then each of the kids drink from that cup, so that's okay. That's not called pagum if you're drinking from the kosher bracha directly. That's one option. Source 39, the Sharat Tziyun says that. Ukshesoshin kula mikoshal bracha, avagav dehushose mitchila mikri mikoshe eno pagum. It's called non-pagum. The chashuvin kemekadesh gufa. It's considered like the mekadesh. Rakish shofech. If it's a different kos, so then it has to be unpagum. The other option, Rav Simcha ben Cohen talks about, and other poskim also discuss this, what I could do is after I make Kiddush, I first pour half of the kos into a cup, and then I drink from my cup. I have to leave a revius in, or a rove revius I have to drink. I drink, and then what's in the cup wasn't drunk from. So then I could pour into all the little cups. I could pour and send it out to everyone at the table. So that's a way that I'm drinking non-pagum, and they're drinking non-pagum. So those are the two options, really. That pour it out, or you could pour it into a cup, and then you drink from that cup, and then whatever's left in the kos. Either way, whatever you pour to everyone else has to be non-drunk from, or you pass the cup around. If you pass the cup around, generally that would only be done by family members. That is in terms of Kiddush. One other hard to make, and that is Moshe Feinstein. I'm not sure if we remember, we mentioned this in the past. I think we might have. If not, I'll mention it now. Moshe has a chumrah about not using disposable cups. Right? He thinks that's called a shavur. That's quoted. But it might not be so clear that Ramosha says all disposable. Ramosha was talking about these paper cups that fall apart when you use it once or twice, and the dentist cups that we had 60, 50 years ago, 40 years ago. Our hard plastic cups, you can use it 100 times. It's hard to think that the Ramosha would say that, but just because it's disposable, that removes its shame kli. Ramosha compares it to a kos with a broken stand. It's a shavur. But most, it says, even L'Shitahs Ramosha, that says Eliezer and other poskim say, what do you mean? It's made this way. It's not a shavur. It's not something missing. This is how it's made. So we assume, let's say at a kiddush, sometimes people look for a kos in order to be machmer for a Moshe. If not, just use a cup. Just use a cup, it's fine. Some are machmer with 2 cups, which is hard to understand because according to Moshe, it's 2 zeros. 2 zeros together make 0. According to the other poskim, you don't need another. So some say it makes it not batel. Okay, either way, that's that. Last topic for today, and that is Kiddush b'makom su'uda. Kiddush b'makom su'uda. There is a machlokas Rav and Shmuel in Psachim Daf Kuf Aleph. You have it there. Now we're on page 82. The Gemara in Psachim discusses about Kiddush and Shul. Kiddush and Shul, which the Tur says, if it was up to me, I'd be mavatel Kiddush and Shul, because there aren't aniyim in the Shul anymore, and nobody is Yotze for that, so I would just get rid of it. But many Shuls still have Kiddush and Shul. So as the Gemara says, if you make Kiddush and Shul, but you didn't eat the meal there, says Rav, you were Yotze de yayin lo yatzu. Rav says, we're not getting into the wine issue now, but you did Kiddush yatzu. Rav says you're Yotze Kiddush, even though you have wine in the Shul and you ate your meal somewhere else. Ushmuel Amar, Afi de Kiddush lo yatzu, you weren't Yotze Kiddush. Why? Because the Gemara continues and says, Shmuel holds, ain't Kiddush ela b'makom su'uda. Kiddush is only b'makom su'uda. What does makom mean? What is makom? The Gemara here talks about place. Hani mili b'bayis l'bayis, avamakom l'makom chai beis alo. You might have thought that from house to house, but not within one place in the house. Rav Anan bar Tachlifa says, no, within one house is okay. Different dargas, as we'll see. What's the svar for in Kiddush ela b'makom su'uda, or what's the source? So the Rashbam quotes 2 days. The Rashbam there, Psachim Kuf Aleph quotes 2 days, which the Achronim pick up on. Number 1, source 42. Kid the Parshinan Taimi Lakamei, Ein Kiddush Ela B'makom Suda, based on the pasuk in Yeshayahu. V'karasa la Shabbos oneg. You shall call oneg pleasure for Shabbos. B'makom sha'ata korei la Shabbos, in the place that you are calling Shabbos, meaning your meal, in the place that you're having your meal, Kriya the Shabbos. Right, Kriya the Kiddush, Shamtei Oneg. The place where I said it the opposite way. The place where you're calling out Shabbos, which is Kiddush, that's where you have to have your meal. That's where you have your meal. Okay, that's a drush of a Karasa l'Shabbos, Oneg. Karasa l'Shabbos, where you're calling out Shabbos, Kiddush, Oneg, that's where your Oneg should be, that's where your meal should be. Umedrashu, that's number 1. Inami, says Tosfos, Svarahi, mi de'ikva Kiddush al hayayin, when you're koveya, since we're koveya our meal on wine, kidatani lakaman zachrei al hayayin, mistam al hayayin shebedochas shebeshasa suda hukva. It says you have to be make your suda nikva al hayayin. So mistama, the yayin during the meal is the one that we're going to use for Kiddush. Some achronim say maybe this is machlokas. These 2 days are about, is Kiddush b'makom suda a din in the Kiddush or a din in the suda? Is it to anchor my Kiddush, or is it to make my Suda more special? So that's the 2 ways of looking at it, Kiddush Makom Suda. Either way, Lamaisa, that could have nafkaminas, as maybe we'll talk about soon. Lamaisa, Kiddush Makom Suda has to do with the what, the where, and the when. The what, the where, and the when. So let's talk about each one of those. The what. What is Suda for Kiddush Makom Suda? What's the definition of a meal? So this is again a machlokas, and again the Gaonim play a role. Remember the Gaonim earlier said you can't be mishtatif. Can't be mitzad many people for the shiur. Here the Gaonim are going to come up with a kula. The Gaonim say you don't need bread. Su'uda Shabbos, you need bread. But Kiddush b'makam Su'uda, it's enough to have something less than bread. Kasval Gaonim, and maybe this relates to the 2 days in the that we just said from the Rashbam. Is it din in the Su'uda? Then maybe you would need bread. Or is it din in the Kiddush? Okay. Kasval Gaonim, Hadamrin ein Kiddush b'makam Su'uda, ein tzarach sheyigmar sham kol Su'udaso. You don't have to have your whole meal there. Ela afilu achal davar muat. You eat a little bit. If you eat a little bit, Oshasa koz yayin shechayav ala bracha, or you drink a lot of wine, Yatza de Kiddush, you're Yotzei Kiddush. So the Torah quotes from the Gaonim that you don't need actual bread. Tosfos is not so sure. Tosfos, it sounds like from Tosfos that that the kula of the Gaonim, that drinking wine would be enough. They're not sure because it sounds like the story in the Gemara that Rabbah told his students to eat in the place where they eat bread. Either way, the Shulchan Aruch quotes both days. I'm sorry, it quotes the day of the Gaonim. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the day of the Gaonim. Kiddush b'makam Suda does not require bread, and that's the minhag of Klal Yisrael. You have a Kiddush in Shul. Many times people aren't eating bread there, but you have mizonos. You have other mizonos, and that's enough for Kiddush b'makam Suda. What about less than a mizonos? So there is a daya. The Mishnah Berurah quotes this in the next source in 46. The Shilti Kiborim quotes in Hilchos Shalosh, which also we try not to rely on for that. Maybe even less, maybe even fruit, maybe. So is there anybody to rely on? There is somebody to rely on, but really l'chadchila one should have a mizonos at a kiddush, have a cookie. Challant is mizonos, have some type of mizonos. But that's already relying on the kula. Why? Who says otherwise? Who's otherwise? The Gra. The Bir Halachot, if you look for a minute, skip for a minute to page 40, source 48, the Gaonim quote, the Bir Halachot quotes on the Shulchan Aruch, with the Shulchan quoted the Gaonim, Ma'aserav, the Gra says, no, you need bread. The Gra would not eat at the Kiddush. I mean, maybe for many reasons, but he would not eat the Kiddush because he says you have to have bread. You have to have bread. That's the din of the Kiddush b'makam Suda. He's machmir against the Shulchan Aruch, against the Gaonim. But again, the Shulchan Aruch passes like the Gaonim in source 45. Afilu achar davar muat, that is okay. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes all of these kulas, and one should remember, if one didn't eat mizonos, according to the days they have to eat mizonos at the Kiddush, then you weren't even allowed to eat anyway. Why? Because in Kiddush ala b'makam Suda, there's an Issur to eat before Kiddush. So if you weren't Yotzei your mitzvah of Kiddush, then you weren't allowed to eat at all. So one should be very careful in terms of Kiddush b'makam Suda to have a mizonos. Again, if you have something else, is there what to rely on? Yish be a malisbach, but it's really a b'diavad, right? Maybe if you have a lot of wine, you have a whole revius of wine. Some poskim say the Pnei Halacha quotes that, but again, it's definitely better not to. And again, the machlokas grow on the Gaonim and Lamdas might be: is it a din in the Kiddush or is it a din in the Suda? That's in terms of the what. By the way, that's why there's some. Have the minhag, even if they made Kiddush in Shul, they had heard Kiddush in Shul and had Challant and Kogel, when they get home, do you go straight to Motzei? So there are those that say maybe you should make Kiddush again. Why? If there are people that didn't hear Kiddush, but even if everybody heard Kiddush, to be Yotzei the sheet of the Gra. Because the Gra says you weren't Yotzei the Kiddush. How'd you eat? So maybe you could also be Mitzaref the Ravid. The Ravid that said there's no Issur of eating before Kiddush on Shabbos day, only Friday night. So that Ravid, along with the Gra, you're not doing anything wrong, and one should make Kiddush again. Okay, what about time? So time, as soon as possible, right? You shouldn't have big breaks between the Kiddush and the Suda. That's what the Ramah says in Reish Ayin Gimel. Reish Ayin Gimel is a simon about Kiddush b'makam Suda. V'tzorach lechol b'makam Kiddush la'alter, right away. O she'bedaito lechol shamiyad. Or at least you had in mind to eat right away. If there's a little break, it's okay. Few minutes break is okay. One should try to do Netilas Yadayim and wash as soon after the Kiddush as possible. We do our best. Fine. That's in terms of the when. What about the where? So that's what we saw earlier. The Gemara that we had earlier, the source for Kiddush b'makam Suda, Shmuel was particular to recite Kiddush in the same room. Right? Now you can't go to different rooms. So what if you had in mind? So that's the machlokas here that the Rosh quotes between himself and Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon. Again, the Gaon are playing a major role in this year. Rabbeinu Nisim quotes in the Megillah Starim. Tahadam rinan in kiddush b'makam Suda. When we say in kiddush b'makam Suda, hani hecha shayvedaito b'tchil lechal makam kiddush. If I have in mind to eat in one place and then I change my mind, I want to eat somewhere else after I make kiddush before I have the Suda, that's a problem. But if when I made kiddush, I knew I was going to eat somewhere else, then you're Yotzei. That's okay. Ulach Ora, the Rosh says, I think, and he quotes this from a Yerushalmi, and the Rosh says, I think the Bavli argues on the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi who allows you to have das and go somewhere else, I think the Bavli argues because of the Gemara that we had earlier based on Shmuel. Miyu, he says, maybe not. According to Yerushalmi, it sounds like a t'nai would help. Maybe that only means within a house or within a place from the downstairs to the upstairs. But maybe in two different houses, maybe even the Yerushalmi would say you can't do that. From house to house, maybe even the Yerushalmi would say das doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work. So, machlokes, whether there's a machlokes between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi or not. The Rosh said, quotes Rabbeinu Nisim, maybe there's a machlokes, maybe not. The Ran does not like the chiluk, and he says, according to the Yerushalmi, one can make Kiddush and go even from bias to bias. The Rosh wanted to be mechalek. Das works within the same house. The Ran says, what difference does it make? If das, you're allowed to move, so then you can move. Okay, it's better if you could see the place. It's better, but that is not, that's not ma'akev. That's what the Ran discusses. And the Shulchan Aruch quotes both opinions, the Rosh, Rabbeinu Nisim, and the Ramah is Mekel. The Ramah is Mekel, like the Shita of Rabbeinu Nisim, that we have. Shulchan Aruch, Ein Kiddush Ala Makam Suda, Ubebayis Echad Mipina Lepina Chashem Makav Echad. One house is one place, right? If you make Kiddush in one corner of the Kiddush room and then move to the other side, that's for sure okay. That's for sure okay. What about inside to outside? That's also okay. Going from the house to the sukkah. The Gemara talks about that. The sukkah to the house to the sukkah. The Yesh Omrim, the Shulchan Aruch continues on the next page, page 90. The Yesh Omrim, Shekol Shara Makomo. As long as you can see the other place, as long as you can see it. The Yesh Omrim, Shim Kiddush b'makam echad. Al das lechol b'makam acher shaper dami. As long as he had the das, again, it's better if if it's in one house, like let's say the some shuls, the rabbi makes kiddush, or the guy makes kiddush in the shul, and then they go downstairs for the kiddush. So that's not l'chadchila, but it's l'chadchila if people are going to eat without making kiddush, or people are just going to skip kiddush, or there's not enough, they're not going to hear. So if the rabbi determines that that's the best, so it's a b'di'evet, but it's a b'di'evet that we rely on this situation because the other choice is worse. And therefore, if you have in mind that you're eating downstairs and it's in the same building, even though you can't see it, it would be okay. Rav Yosef writes again in 54, if one could see the place, then for sure it is okay. You can even go from house to house. But again, this is all shas adchak. L'chadchila should be in the same place wherever we are eating. That's where we should make kiddush. Okay, these are many different, amazing, important halachas relating to kiddush. B'ezras Hashem, next time we pick up with the halachas of onik Shabbos and Shitahs and other meals. So we will have to get to all of that. But this takes us through the third shiur on kiddush. Have a great day.